So our speaker for the 11 o'clock hour is Daniel Consolo. He is a very experienced senior developer, worked with a lot of different things throughout the year, so you can look at his bio online for the details for that. He's going to talk to us today for something that's about 2,000 times worse than I have to do. He's going to talk about optimizing 6,000 sites up from 4,000 sites as originally proposed. So let's welcome Daniel.
Thank you very much, and welcome to a technical plan for success, preparing to optimize over 6,000 sites and growing at NYU. Again, my name is Daniel, and before we jump into today's topic, a little bit about myself. So I've been working with WordPress in enterprise environments going on 10 years now. I've used WordPress for anything from serving live stream video content to millions of Canadians to building e-learning software for a local real estate college. I'm currently a senior developer at FlowPress, where I work with enterprise clients to help scale WordPress and meet their needs. A little bit about FlowPress. We're a Toronto-based agency. We're 4 years old. We have a great team, as well as some really great clients like NYU, like University of Toronto, and Blackboard LMS. We really love WordPress. It's what we live and breathe. We know enterprises demand long-term solutions, and so we provide the tools and the processes you need, and it's that experience that I'd like to share with you today. Taking a look at WordPress in academia, this is the second year now of WPCampus, and we've seen some really great applications of WordPress in academia. And so also I hope that you've had the opportunity to see the team at NYU's presentation yesterday about how they utilize WordPress to meet the demands of their faculty and students. But what we'd like to focus on today are the challenges that technical teams in higher eds face, and it's the processes that you can implement to resolve those challenges. And what we found the biggest challenge really to be facing most teams is that there's a lack of process and workflows. And when we're focused continually building new features or responding to support tickets, there's not enough time to properly validate and test changes before they're deployed out to all of the sites across your network. And it's when these issues begin to pile up, we deliver a suboptimal experience to our users who depend on our sites. Getting things back under control can be overwhelming. And so I'd like to show you how we at FlowPress break down these challenges and provide long-lasting improvements and leave you with the tools and knowledge you need to succeed with WordPress. And so looking at what we'll discuss today, we're going to break things down into a process audit, a technical audit, and then we're going to review the results and some next steps. Process auditing. So a process audit involves looking at the development and communication workflows that your team has in place, get a better sense of how your team works, how you write code, and how you deploy that code. And so we'll discuss the importance of automated testing and deployments, peer code reviews, team communications, as well as proactive monitoring of your sites. Looking first at deployments, it's my hope that your team is using some form of version control already. So what I'd like to talk about really is why deployments and version control is important beyond simply tracking file changes. Really, version control acts as a safety net for your site. It allows you to quickly roll back a broken site to a previously working version, lets you easily review and validate changes before they're deployed out to multiple environments. And really, by allowing your team to quickly track changes made by others and through the use of things like Git issues and peer reviews, which we'll talk about next, it's also a great communication tool for your team. And I was going to talk a little bit about version control workflows, specific workflows, but really what we found is that workflows are very specific to your team's needs, the different types of environments you have and the team members you have. So, I mean, generally at FlowPress, we recommend a base of a master and a develop branch, and using features and hotfixes as you need to deploy out to potentially multiple staging and testing environments and your production environments as well. Next part of process auditing that we look at are code reviews. We know that it's important that when working with such a large network of sites, developers have another set of eyes to help them verify changes before they're deployed. And so having open communication really goes a long way to making sure that the process of code reviews feels less like micromanagement. Not every commit needs to be reviewed, especially when you're starting out for the first time with code reviews. We find sticking with code reviewing major changes at the start, just get your team comfortable with the process and the process of reviewing each other's work, providing positive and constructive feedback. Peer reviews are not meant to be an opportunity to nitpick or criticize others' codes. We want to encourage collaboration and communication, not drive it away. We find that when we're focused on rapid development, the peace of mind that we get from knowing your code has been validated by your peers that you trust is really invaluable. The next part of process auditing that we look at is testing. Comprehensive testing of your sites is a critical part to the development process. We must ensure that all code changes and deployments are thoroughly tested before they go out into the hands of our faculty and students. And really, it's the automation of testing that's key to ensuring that we complete coverage of our sites without bogging down our developers with process. And so when we talk about testing, we like to approach testing really from two angles. We consider behavioral testing and visual regression testing. And so behavioral testing is really a set of best practices used to write comprehensive tests that replicate common user interactions and behaviors across your sites. So when we think about those types of interactions, we think about things like filling out a contact form. So making sure a contact form could be filled out and properly submits and provides a response. Behavioral testing will help you automate those types of user actions, things like opening up modal windows and stuff like that. Behavioral testing is great for that. For behavioral testing, we really like the Bhat framework. It's a PHP framework that's extendable, it's very well documented, and it features tests that are written in plain English. So really, it's not just developers that have to write these tests. Anyone can write the tests. They're very simple to write, and they're very comprehensive and thorough. For automated testing and visual browser testing, we like Ghost Inspector. We find that Ghost Inspector has a lot of really great features right out of the box, things like video recording of your automated steps, screenshot comparisons. So if there are changes that happen on your site and the system automatically detects that there's been a visual change on your site, it'll quickly alert you to that, and you can have a before and after visual screenshot comparison, and it'll do a nice diff of all the changes that were made. It's also got a great API and a really great Chrome extension that actually, when you run it, will allow you to, as you're interacting with a site, clicking around, filling out those contact forms, it actually records all of those steps and turns them into a test automatically for you that you can then just easily replicate and use it across all the sites on your networks. This is an example of one of the Bhat tests that the NYU team had created. And really, it's a very simple test in principle. Basically, what it achieves is confirming that a site is online by checking for a string of text on the page, just to make sure a site is rendered. And what we're looking at here is the site itself is actually only accessible if the user is logged in. So what we're able to do is, through a few simple steps, is log a user in, make sure the site loads, actually goes to the site in question, so one of the sites out of the 5,000 plus on the network, and make sure that it can find the text on the page just to confirm it's loading, goes back to WP admin, logs out, and looks for a successful logout attempt. So again, a very simple test, but if after a deployment, updates to plugins and themes, you wanted to just quickly confirm that the sites are online without having to open up all 5,000 of them and confirm that yourself, a simple test like this can be automated very quickly and will give you the results you need. Moving on to continuous integration systems. As we've shifted to agile workflows, developers have been able to produce code in shorter iterations. So we've improved our output and our efficiency, but downstream processes like deployments and testing are often neglected. And this leads to bottlenecks at the end of the release cycle, which ultimately increases the time and effort needed to properly QA. So really, the goal is to increase code quality while providing us with fast and continual feedback. And with continuous integration, developers are encouraged to commit code much more frequently on a daily basis so that we can allow the CI system to actively test and deploy the changes for you while providing you with a constant feedback loop. This alerts your team to syntax errors, failed tests much more frequently, giving your team the time that they need through the development process to properly address these issues as they come up. There are some great continuous integration systems out there. I'm sure some of you are familiar with these. You may be using them already. We've used Circle CI, we've used Travis, we've used all of these. We really like Circle CI because it's got a really great intuitive UI. It's a web-based platform. It's free to sign up and get started with. Again, just really visually attractive, has great documentation for it. On the other side is Jenkins, which is open source. Again, very well documented, extendable, lots of great resources out there for you. The UI is not as clean or as intuitive as Circle CI's might be. I know there was an initiative to redesign Jenkins, but I haven't seen that come out yet. So, and it's also worth noting that while Circle CI is web hosted, Jenkins must be installed on a server to run. So that's in consideration as well. Looking next at team communications. And here we look at software development methods your team uses and how you track and manage tasks and what tools you use for communications. And ensuring that you have an active and engaged development team starts with open lines of communication and ongoing collaboration. At FlowPress, we practice an agile workflow. We do a weekly team sprint, daily stand-ups to keep everybody on track. We use Slack as our main communication platform and Teamwork for managing our internal tasks and client tasks as well. We know there's a wealth of great communication tasks out there, communication platforms out there, as well as task management platforms as well. So I'm sure you'll find something that works for your team as well. These are just some great options that we've seen that some of our clients use as well. Systems monitoring. Keeping an eye on over 5,000 sites at once can be tough. And so we rely on tools like New Relic to give us the coverage and insight we need. And really, New Relic is great as a means to help you trace the root of slow transactions, pinpoint the cause of a slow database query, track user engagement, both locally and abroad, as well as measure uptime, response times of your sites, and really just view overall health of your system from the server setups themselves to your applications. Using systems monitoring, really what we're looking for are trends in the numbers. So looking for that, being very proactive with systems monitoring will help you stay ahead of potential issues before they have a chance to spread throughout your multi-site networks. So that was process auditing. Looking next at technical auditing. Technical auditing really is a process of thoroughly testing and benchmarking your sites, where we work to identify key performance bottlenecks, find and address existing bugs, flag potentially troublesome plugins and themes, as well as build an action plan to help remedy any issues. There's a lot to cover in the technical auditing, so we'll jump right into this. So first part of technical auditing that we look at are bottlenecks. So while the tools and the processes we've discussed so far are great ways to maintain growth and efficiency, how do we deal with the issues that you're facing right now? So at FlowPress, we perform a comprehensive audit of both the site's front-end performance as well as back-end performance, really just working to identify those key bottlenecks and how to remedy them. To help us identify bottlenecks, there are a lot of great tools that are out there. Tools like sitespeed.io, GTmetrix are great ways of auditing your front end, help you determine application load times, your page weight, accessibility, cacheability, SEO friendliness, really just giving you valuable insight into exactly why your site may be taking so long to load. We also look at call graphs. So call graphs are really a great tool for analyzing what can be a rather complicated WordPress loading procedure, especially when we start to pile on lots of plugins that hook into WordPress and change that loading procedure. They give us really detailed consumption metrics, like resource usage, CPU times, memory usage, as well as real world times and much, much more. Generating call graphs themselves can be quite resource intensive, meaning we'll take a look at a snippet here of a call graph. And to generate these things, again, it can be very CPU intensive. So we like to do it through XHProf and XHGUI. We do it through a localized Docker environment. So we'll typically build a local environment of a client's website and run these types of audits and processes against a local environment. We like to do it through Docker because they're easily scalable. We can spin up environments, run these tests, and then knock down these environments once we're done running those tests. And what we're looking at here is a call graph. This is really maybe 10% of the entire call graph for a transaction within WordPress. The transaction is a call to WP admin on the network side for a multi-site. And again, there was no way I could fit the entire call graph on here. And I know it's kind of small, but really what I'd like to draw your eye to is just how we can see a bottleneck starting to form here. So we can see all the hooks and the actions from WordPress, and we can see how other plugins tie into those processes. And we can see in yellow where those bottlenecks start to form. Now that bottleneck in yellow is the apply filters action. And so we can see as that bottleneck starts to grow and then turns to red, right away, if I look at that and I'm looking at the big picture of the entire call graph, we can see those bottlenecks forming, and it's easy to trace down exactly where they're coming from and what maybe external sources are affecting the WordPress loading procedure. So again, in this example, we can see here that at the apply filters action, WPMU comes along, and then the dashboard just really takes a dive there, right? So right away, we know if I'm looking at this and someone tells me that, hey, WP admin is loading really slowly, I can see right away, maybe if I disable WPMU right now, let's see what happens, regenerate a call graph, and hopefully that'll go away. So again, call graphs, very important tools. Looking at themes and plugins as part of the technical audit. So it's important that we want to provide our users with plenty of choice and flexibility when it comes to theme and plugin. You also want to ensure that you're providing, like what we're providing our students and our faculty is stable, secure, and well-maintained. For themes, we recommend that you pick themes that stick to WordPress's theme handbook, to follow those guidelines for themes that are required to be submitted to WordPress.org. Same thing goes with plugins. As an aside, we found in the past commercially available themes and plugins, just because you're paying for them, doesn't mean they're always the best choice. We've run some themes through, there's a great plugin for WordPress that will perform basically the theme audit that's required for the theme to be submitted to WordPress.org. And we ran some commercial themes through that process, and they failed. And so again, just because we're paying for something doesn't necessarily mean it's the best choice. So that being said, what we look for when we're auditing potential themes and plugins to add to our multi-site networks, we look at things like, when we're considering themes, we'll look at, first of all, going back to offering flexibility and choice to our users, we'd like to pick themes that have additional settings and customization options. And it's important to note that with those frameworks tends to come a lot of overhead, right? And if we're scaling these themes out across thousands of sites, that overhead can really start to pile up on us. So again, it's great to be able to change the theme colors and add logos and stuff through an options page, but just be wary of external dependencies and libraries these themes may be using. And again, when we scale that out over thousands of sites, the impact that really creates these bottlenecks. When auditing themes, we also look for simple syntax errors, usage of deprecated WordPress calls. Again, we've seen a lot of that. If the themes themselves maybe fall out of maintenance updates or end of support, checking for deprecated flags within the themes is a great way to stay ahead of potential issues when you may upgrade WordPress. And these themes may not be compatible any longer. We also look for optimizations of included assets. So again, a lot of these themes are really visually impactful, big hero images and stuff like that. A lot of the times though, we find that the bundled assets aren't very well optimized, especially not for the web. So take a look at how big those media assets are if you're going to be using them, and maybe make sure you compress those for the web. We also look at SEO friendliness, and we look at language and translation readiness as well for the themes. When it comes to the plugins, similar process. You know, we're looking for overall resource usage. So we're looking at memory being consumed, time added to database queries. So again, looking at that call graph with WPMU, activating a plugin like that on the network, we'd be looking for issues like that to start to form before we determine whether or not it's something that's safe to roll out to all of our users. And finally, looking again at how well maintained and updated the plugin is. So sometimes we might pick a plugin to solve a particular issue, but what we look for is if the plugin hasn't been updated in 6 months or a year, you know, we start to consider what that means for future-proofing our sites and whether or not it's a good choice to use those plugins. Looking at server architecture as part of technical auditing, we know that with a large network of sites that we can get sudden traffic spikes. We can have one site bringing down, you know, 1,000 more on its own. And really a lot of the times those types of bottlenecks are really unexpected. They hit us at the worst times, of course, when we're not prepared for them. And so firstly, ensuring you have a good caching strategy in place is really paramount to help take the strain off of your servers during peak loads. For caching, we look at Redis caching for object caching in WordPress, and tools like Varnish and Akamai for flat page caching. Also looking at a load balance server setup is also a great way to help spread the traffic over multiple servers. Using a CDN helps reduce latency by serving your content from servers that are closest to your users. Another thing to consider is if you have a large WP uploads directory, which again on large multi-sites can happen as users are constantly uploading media. One great way to kind of take some of the strain off your main servers is to offload the WP uploads directly to something like Amazon S3. Delicious Brains makes a great plugin called WP Offload S3, which helps kind of mediate that process for you. And it's a really great plugin. It'll take care of updating the database, pointing everything to new paths like on S3 for you automatically, so all your content just works. To give you a better idea of the technical requirements that are needed to serve large multi-site networks, briefly, the NYU software stack that we're currently using is an Oz EC2 instance. We have the Amazon Aurora database, Redis caching, PHP 7, Nginx is serving everything, and then we use Shibboleth single sign-on. One quick note about PHP 7 as well is that it's important not to neglect the software updates on your servers. So we've noticed just from converting from PHP 5.6 to 7, a 60% increase in performance without doing anything, just upgrading PHP to PHP 7. Now, one consideration with that is we have to do lots of testing to confirm that all these plugins and themes are going to be compatible on PHP 7. Lots of things have changed syntaxically in PHP 7 that some plugins just aren't ready yet, so be wary of that before you make those updates. And always, most importantly, really, is always consider that before you throw more hardware at a problem, that following the advice given in this technical process can really help optimize your sites on the software side of things. Before, again, we just start throwing hardware. You'd really be surprised that optimized and efficient platforms can really run on minimally spec'd hardware. Again, if everything is a well-oiled machine, doesn't need to be a ton of hardware thrown at. So looking at the process at NYU before FlowPress's engagement, lucky for us, NYU already has a great team of developers. They also already had some great tools and processes in place. They were using GitLab for version control. They moved to Git now as well. They had Jenkins as continuous integration system, and they're using Slack and Asana at the time for communications and task management as well. One of the challenges of having a small development team is that we simply don't have enough resources to manage all the moving pieces in a large multi-site. And so when developers are focused on building new features or putting out fires all the time, maintenance and updates can start to fall behind. And sometimes when we add new themes and plugins to our networks, we don't have enough time to properly vet them all before we send them out to our users. Since its inception, NYU Multisite has now grown to over 6,000 sites, and it's growing more by the minute and by the day. At the time, we had over 80 plugins, over 148 different themes for faculties and students to use on the multi-site. As time passed, some of these plugins and themes start to fall behind on updates, on maintenance, and start causing issues that, depending on how widely used throughout the multi-site network they are, can really have a huge impact on that network. And while the amount of plugins and themes active on the network is not necessarily a cause for concern, it's the code quality of the plugins and the themes that we're using. And again, as these issues discussed previously continue to remain, the plugins and themes new plugins and themes are constantly being added to the multi-site network, and that technical debt just continues to grow. And again, when we consider how impactful that one slow database query can be to a single site, if you extrapolate that out to 5,000, 6,000 sites, you get a better idea of how it can start to bring down the performance of a multi-site network. So after FlowPress's engagement with NYU, some of the things we have in place now are proactive monitoring through New Relic. So again, both of our teams use the New Relic platform to stay ahead of issues before they spread out of control. We've added the addition of automated testing with custom tests that are written in Bhat and integrated through the Jenkins deployment system. We've reorganized and retooled our Git processes and the Git branches we use to help us better manage our workflows, be able to quickly push code out to multiple testing environments and track where those deployments have been made. We've also implemented a Dockerized version of that shibboleth sign-on system that we use so that we can easily build new applications even outside of WordPress and test against single sign-on, which can be tricky depending on how locked down that stuff is within your environments. So we have a nice Dockerized version that we can just run locally and connect to, in our case, testshib.org, which is a great platform for testing shibboleth. As well as once we have gotten the blessing to test against the actual production IDP, we can test through Docker as well. We've also used Docker to create a Selenium-based testing platform as well. So as part of the automation going through the Jenkins pipeline, when we actually do our deployments through the Dockerized automated testing, we can even test our own local environments before we even get to staging to figure out whether or not things are working as they should. So some revelations from our audit. I think really the most eye-opening thing for us was, again, just that impact that a few poorly coded plugins or themes can have on that large multi-site network when things really start to spread out of control. And again, like how that single bad database query can bring down the performance of MySQL and affect that entire multi-site network. These issues have a noticeable effect on performance of the network, of course, but they also make debugging a challenge. So when we have a lot of syntax errors being thrown by plugins that are being actively used, fills up logs, makes it difficult for developers to track down where these issues are coming from. And so it's those tools and processes that we've put in place, like call graphs, that really take some of that strain off the developers and help them fix some of these problems. It's also important to note not to neglect your WP options table. So WP options table, when we had first taken a look, it's not unexpected to see a WP options table bloat to tens of thousands of records and tons of data, 4, 5, 10 megabytes of data inside a WP options table. It wasn't necessarily the amount of records or the size of the WP options table that really caught our eye. It was what was being stored in there. We found anything from social media tracking info from certain plugins, we found entire HTML and CSS for the settings page of a plugin being stored as an option, and they're all auto-loaded. So what's happening is WordPress, when it scans your WP options table for auto-loaded data, it grabs all that data and puts it into a single query and attempts to cache that. And that'll put that into memcache, or your temporary storage. Now, the issue with that is memcache by default only has a 1 megabyte storage limit. Some of your hosts may bump that up to 2 or 4 megabytes, but we were seeing 9 to 10 megabytes of data. And so the problem with that is when WordPress attempts to grab all that data and cache it, you're exceeding the limit of Redis. So it never gets cached in the first place. So it's constantly purging and trying to recache all that data again. And so it never gets cached. And so we're constantly hitting the MySQL database, and that's just dragging down our performance. So by simply cleaning up a lot of that data, and a lot of that data gets left behind by plugins you may have disabled, themes you may have long since disabled that haven't cleaned up after themselves. Or maybe we manually removed the plugin without deactivating it first, letting its hooks run and clean up after itself. And so purging out all that data, we were able to get the database or the WP options table down to a couple hundred rows under a megabyte of data, and get our Redis caches working again, taking that strain off the MySQL servers. When it comes to a multi-site network, it's also important to stress not to skip the upgrade network step. Okay, the upgrade network step very simply just takes care of updating the database version flags for your multi-sites. But really what's happening in the background is WordPress is attempting to make curl requests to all the sites on your network, and it'll attempt to do them 5 at a time. And so if your site is already almost near capacity in terms of performance, and WordPress is now doing curl requests, external requests to your sites, it starts to bring everything down, and you get timeouts just accessing the WP admin interface. So sometimes we're locked completely out of WP admin and hitting 503 errors constantly. And when that happens on a large multi-site network, you're kind of stuck because you can't get into WP admin and you can't run this upgrade network. One clever way that the NYU team found around that was to build through WP CLI to create a script that will basically loop through all the sites in the multi-site network and run that upgrade. And the nice thing about that is we can automate even that. So we can send that to Jenkins and say every time we do a WordPress core update, run the network upgrade again as part of it, and it all just runs through that same process. And because we're not actually loading all those full pages, we're doing it through scripting, it's much more efficient. So our results. With the right tools and processes in place, as well as finding a mix of the right server architecture for our needs, our teams are now able to reliably and quickly deploy code that has been properly validated and into a production environment that is both stable and performant. So we'll quickly just go over some results here. Taking a look at a previous transaction that we can see, one of our sites we're experiencing a load time at about 8.5 seconds. It makes a lot of HTTP requests that we try to slim down. The weight of the page is coming in around 4 megabytes, so we're considering mobile users. Again, media optimization is key. But really, most importantly, is that site was taking almost 9 seconds to load for a user. So you can think of your students if they, need to go to a professor's site to grab the lab notes or something like that, and they're stuck sitting there waiting when their time is precious. That's just not acceptable. What we're able to do after putting in these processes and these optimizations is get that number down to something that's much more realistic, much more acceptable, 2 seconds and under. We did that by some of the things you can see, shaving off some of those HTTP requests, optimizing some of those media assets, and just implementing those processes and tools that we discussed earlier. This is another example. This is taken from a combination of sitespeed.io, which is that front-end auditing tool we talked about before, and some of the custom stuff that we use at FlowPress. So again, this is the before. We're seeing the back-end time there at about 1.4 seconds. The front-end time's coming in about 5 seconds. The time to first paint is taking almost 3-4 seconds before the user even sees anything. And of course, again, that page load time coming in at about 8 seconds. Speed index, not great either. And the cacheability is only at 4 weeks. So after improving those processes, improving the ability for WordPress to properly cache stuff, we're now seeing cacheability increasing, and that's having the effect on the front end time as well as the back end time. So again, getting those load times down into acceptable ranges. Much less time on the back end. Our speed index is great. Cacheability is great as well. And this is from New Relic. So this is looking at what New Relic considers an Apdex score. Really, an AppDex score to New Relic is basically a combination of all of the metrics for your site. And what we're looking at was previously over a sample size of about 3,200 individual users and individual transactions. We were looking at really the bulk, 86% there were coming in below an acceptable range. Okay, so the vast majority of users are having a poor experience on the site. After implementing those processes and those tools, over a much larger sample size, this time 44,000, 91% of them are coming in. We're right where we want to be. We're at 0.94, 0.95 to the browser, to the server, and we're seeing much better results. So a little bit of work left to do, of course, but we're much happier with these results now. That's it. Questions? Yes?
Your automated tests, do they run on every single commit or just like the most recent one when they push?
Sure, good question. So the question is the automated testing platform, is that triggered on every single commit, or can we control that? And yes, that's absolutely something we can control. You can also choose to run certain types of tests and certain types of commits. So again, as part of the visual regression testing and the automated behavioral testing, we also have simple PHP unit testing, just to make sure that new commits that are going in don't have any obvious syntax errors that we can catch and quickly remedy. And so of course you can control that. We do like to have that testing automatically. So developers again are encouraged to commit once a day, so this way they can get that continual feedback loop. But we found that the process is actually really quick, and it's not something that it doesn't stop the developer from continuing on with their work while those tests are running. They can let them run in the back end or in the background, and then once the results are published, they can see if they need to make any changes.
Just wanted to answer on that as well.
Yeah.
We run it on a daily basis for proactive, just in case if something goes down. But in addition to that, what we also do is that when we deploy new codes or new things are being changed on the server, we also do it at the same time as well. So it's on both the bases.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Your Bhat automated testing looks like it has some WordPress specific fixtures. Did you develop your own, or is there a particular extension that you work with?
Great question. So we're asking if with the Bhat testing, some of the WordPress specific steps of the testing platform, was that something that we've developed custom, or was there some sort of library we helped? And it was a bit of both. So we developed the steps custom, as well as we took a look at, there's a great library called WordHat, and it's a Bhat library that comes with a suite of tests that will cover steps that are common to WordPress. So logging in and adding a new user, or creating a post, making sure a user can create a post, publish content, upload media, managing plugins and themes, stuff like that. That all comes bundled with WordHat. And then we'll have our own custom tests, especially to cover things like the shibboleth login, as well as some of the custom code that the NYU team has created as well. During their presentation yesterday, they talked about the site setup wizard that Neil created. And so we have custom Bhat tests to make sure that that custom functionality works as expected as well. Yeah. Anyone else? No? That's it. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming out.